Kelly, Sunday morning, but he joined him Sunday afternoon. About 11:30 Sunday. Nice though, nice big one. This is big, it's not bigger than one.
Yeah, on Saturday morning, I had a 10-point buck and a doe laying in my front yard in the rocks.
Thank you. Well, I went out to see the guys. What was it, Sunday, after church Sunday? Went out to the farm, see them, and I was going up the hill here. So I passed toward the cemetery. And a buck shot across.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I looked in my rearview mirror and looked back and the buck is standing. Whoa.
There he is, huh?
But it wasn't a big one. But it was still, it was a deer.
Yeah, they're around, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Gotta be a typo here, this income survey completed?
Something about all the easements.
There's a caveat with income surveys been completed.
I'm like, I thought that would never happen. Impressive.
It's not completed like they qualified for any funding.
Oh,
They don't?
No.
Oh,
oh,
shucks.
The median income there is like $57,600.
Oh,
What's the threshold? Well, it varies based on income and utility rates and debt service. But like I work in Waseca a lot, their median income for the entire city is like $46,000. And they don't get a lot in terms of grant funding. So ultimately, we kind of found out that we had about 80% of the responses that we needed. Not 80% of the residents, but 80% of the 70%. And we saw that it was you're at 57 and you probably need to get to 30 something, and the math just, you could have all low responses and it's a median, so it's not the average, so. Oh, yeah, it's the
it's
middle.
gonna.
It's the middle,
Yeah.
and so that middle doesn't move that much, right? And so, so then we threw in the towel and just said, we'll submit what we have and it is what it is, and it is what it is. We tried.
Yeah, no,
We were all surprised with the result, though. That's pretty significant median income for.
Trip part.
Well, I thought it would be $30,000.
Yeah.
That's what they told us. In fact, I mean, that's, yeah,
I
that's
bet the
what they,
management was surprised.
yeah, they were.
Or the median over at Estates.
Yeah, it was much higher than we had anticipated.
What was it? Maybe
57.
Really?
Over 57,000.
Yeah.
57,600 or $700. Like
I always said I should have done that rather than let my kids destroy all my houses. Should have just bought an old RV, raised my family in that, and then just lit the thing on fire when they all moved out. Put together a house that, like, the kids have ruined the carpeting in every room in our house, like ruined it. Like bottle of black nail polish ruined and stuff like that.
we had a couple of those instances too.
Yeah.
Those are hard on stuff.
Yeah, it's like, why have I even bothered to try to keep the house nice until the kids move out? I love my kids. I'm just doing it. And everybody has to go see the planetary alignment when we're done, so. There is.
Planetary alignment, is that?
Yes, it's, Mars is on the horizon, then it's the moon, then it's, Mercury and Venus.
Well, I'm walking out with you.
Oh, so I've already seen it a couple times, so drag my
Well, I
kids.
can't pick it out.
Hey, it's right outside, it's outdoors. That's where it's going on. So,
My daughter, one of my daughters was really little. We're driving home on 65th Street in Rochester. And she's looking out the window and she goes, I think I found Jupiter. Jupiter. She goes, yeah, it's right there. It was a street light. I always think of that. when we look at
Jupiter's
it.
pretty bright.
So are streetlights.
Yeah.
Some of them.
Yeah.
All right, so go ahead and get started. A lot of updates for everybody and comments, so. I'll make a motion, we accept the agenda.
Second.
Second. Anything, Joe, we need to add other than what we discussed recently? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Approved. There's two sets, there's a September 14th, and there's also a public hearing meeting minutes too, that I gave you a copy, so you're welcome to that as well, so.
I will move to approve the September 14th meeting minutes.
In favor, signify by saying aye. Approved. Okay. Any place you want to start, Joe, or just at the top, or?
At the top, I guess.
Okay.
I guess we can start by, you can talk about it, it's not on the agenda, but is there any follow-up from the public hearing that we should talk about? Not that
I don't think there's anything
surprising, no.
surprising that came out of it.
Yeah,
We had
okay.
just the one challenge that we continually hear about from the
Right.
agreeing to sign up on the easement, but other than that, I don't think there's any.
Well, the first item that we really have to deal with deals with contract one, the wastewater treatment plan. And just kind of talking about contract status update. Contractor continues to be anxious to get going. They're also continuing to look with us at some value engineering options. We've identified some pretty decent options for consideration. We'll get through the award of the contract and work through that in the coming months, bring that forward to the committee and the council. But, you know, it seems like there's some reasonable options and some ways to reduce costs, you know, not huge costs, but hundreds of thousands of dollars that, you know, we can look to do a few things different. Continues to be material supply and you know, just ability to get things in a timely manner. That continues to be a concern of the contractors and will plague us through the entire project. Ductile iron pipe, for example, I get it. In some instances, they're looking at using stainless steel pipe and fabricating it on site in lieu of using ductile pipe. We talked about moving from precast concrete for some of the walls and different portions of the building to cast in place because they can't get it in a timely manner. In fact, he was telling me the other day they kind of started to submit some shop drawings, even though they don't have a contract for some of that stuff, because for like the prefab walls, said, well, if I order them today, I can get them in August. You know, and that's their best guess today. And so those types of delays, you know, really impact a lot of different things. And so they're proactively looking at it, which I think is a great thing. I've been impressed with my correspondence with staff so far. They seem to be pretty on the ball and anxious to get started. So in conjunction with the that contract, in fact, with all three contracts, I have assembled the contract documents. So we assemble 4 sets of contract documents. And then we mail that out to the contractors. They send it to their bonding companies. There's kind of a dance that gets done. It takes 2 to 3 weeks to execute contracts. I've assembled those documents and I'm gonna mail them out tomorrow to the contractors. Just normally I wait till the award, but it's been so long and people are anxious to get moving. I'm gonna kind of preempt that. I've told them that I'm sending them this data. You don't have a contract. You can just sit on it if you want, but at least it'll be in your hands. With the, assuming that the council goes ahead and awards the contracts on like a week from tonight. So trying to facilitate things a little bit, at least from that perspective. So that piece is moving along. The Ornoco Estates wastewater agreement. We have had quite a few meetings with Ornoco Estates. In fact, we had a meeting today at 11 o'clock. Ryland has been meeting with me and Mike Flaherty was on today's call, which I thought was helpful. We met last Friday and twice last week and a couple times the week before. So we are making progress. We finally got review comments on the contract back from Ornoco Estates this afternoon. And Mike Flaherty and I, with some consultation with Ryland, are working through those. My sense with their agreement, this is the agreement, by the way. It's 40 pages long. It's pretty detailed. I didn't print it out for this group just because I don't know that there's anything really surprising in there. It's just voluminous and there's a lot of information. Really kind of spells out, everything from their flow allocation to when they make payments, how they make payments, what they do for utility rates, what their requirements are for operation and maintenance of their lift station. There's some documents about easements in there. And
I think we're on version 7 now.
yeah, we are.
So
7A or so. So it's been a work in progress, but I think it's coming together. We had a good meeting. We've been having good meetings. It does look like they want to be part of the project, which is great. They are picking at a few things that we're trying to work through. One of the things they're kind of picking at is their flow allocation of 55,000 gallons per day. And then the other thing is we have a clause in there that if they exceed that 55,000 gallons, there's a penalty, right? And so between those two things, they're kind of picking at that, wanting a little bit more leeway. And I'm kind of saying, you can have more leeway, but you essentially have to buy capacity at the treatment facility to do that. We're just not going to give you that. And so I think we've kind of worked out a scenario where we're going to keep the hard limit, but maybe back away on the penalty and have a little bit of a grace period because, they want to be able to use their full allocation of 55,000 gallons, but, they might have a month or, maybe they're at 56,000 gallons and does that really matter? Well, it does to a point if it's 60 or 65, if it's significantly over, it probably matters. If it's not, then it really doesn't matter. They're paying on a user basis based on their flow anyway. And so that penalty kind of kicks in. We kind of talked that through and we kind of developed, if you're within 5% of that 55,000, there's no penalty. But once you start to exceed that, then there is a penalty that gradually gets more significant as we get higher. So I think that will be the compromise. We think that will be the compromise that we'll be able to work through with them and they'll find acceptable. So long story short, we're on a path where we're hoping to have the document executed by Friday afternoon.
So Joe, that document, I'm assuming it also restricts them to basically domestic type wastewater.
Absolutely.
Okay, and the peak flow would only be really probably an issue if it's a wet weather type I&I.
Yeah, there's a wet weather clause where they can, if we're experiencing wet weather, then they can exceed the flow by factor 3, just like we do for the facility. We experience it, the design, wet weather flow was calculated into the design facility. So we essentially extended that accommodation for our design to their agreement. Yeah, so this is essentially patterned after the Rochester Ornoco agreement, and then we modified it from there based on some Mike Flaherty's input and some examples that we pulled from elsewhere and just kind of thinking through the process. So it's a more complicated document than I ever dreamed it would be, but it is what it is. And I think it does protect the city well. It's fair to both parties, in fact. So that's where we're at.
If anybody would like a copy, we could send the draft out with the minutes, but.
It is evolving though.
It's evolving and just to the comment about Flattery and Hood, they have attorneys that have written these, might not necessarily Mike, but people within the organization have written these for other plants within Southeast Minnesota. So they're patterning a lot of those stipulations and the penalty fees, which is one thing that they talked about. HAS complained about having a penalty fee, but in the background that Flattery and Hood brought with, that's pretty common. Above, in our case, 55,000, they would have a penalty fee, a monthly fee having that. So but basically they were trying to get something for nothing over 55,000. That's why we have the penalty clause.
And so there has been a sister agreement to this prepared that has been presented to Ornoco Township and has been approved by the Township Board as of October 1st. And that agreement essentially is between the city and the township, and it says, you know, township, you will require Ornoco Estates to enforce the city of Ornoco's utility code. You know, they can't be dumping things in the sewer that they're not supposed to. They need to follow that code. And then the second piece of it is they will assess Ornoco Estates on behalf of the city of Ornoco for the capital costs, which are, you know, that $850,000 over 20 years. And then any unpaid penalties or fees that are due to the city. So for example, if they don't pay their monthly bill, we can assess them. Rather than going to court, we've got a kind of a built-in mechanism, just like we do for anybody else. They're not within Ornoco's jurisdiction, they're in the township. And so that's why that piece was necessary. So we've had some correspondence with Ornoco Township, and they graciously reviewed the agreement, gave us some of their time, and approved the agreement on October 1st. In addition to that, I put together a little letter of transmittal, or a 2-page letter, kind of talking about the proposed improvements within the township's jurisdiction. For example, the force main going to the treatment facility is down a township road. They don't have a permitting process. And so I kind of structured the letter to say, this is our permit because you don't have one, and they accepted that. And obviously they need to know what's being proposed, and we provided those documents to them in the past, but just more formally within the letter. And so that piece of the puzzle's kind of moved forward. So I think the Ornoco Estates and Ornoco Township agreements are moving forward. I do expect that they will be executed by the end of the week. That's exactly what we talked about at our meeting today at, what was it, 11 and 1 or so. So I think that's real positive. The other piece of the puzzle here is the Cedar Ornoco Estates income survey. We kind of talked about that before, but the income survey, we got to a threshold that we were nearly at 70%, but not quite. And so the results of the income survey indicated that they had about a $57,000 some odd median income, which is well above where we dreamed it would be, and well above the funding threshold. So CETA submitted the information that we have, and I think Ornoco Estates gave up. And rightfully so. There's no need to continue down that path. There's no benefit. So we're all disappointed with that, but it is what it is. So at least we turned that rock over.
I did reach out to Dave Dunn, who's the
Yes.
Olmsted County Housing Director, about anything that they could help Ornoco States with grant money or something like that, but the median income pretty took anything that they have to offer, but there is a possibility of something being developed for the individual residents with a lower income to help with their payments, but that's a project that will take some time and won't be done here relatively soon, but there was some willingness to look and help out with some of those residents, so.
We kind of did, Ryland, help facilitate the connection of Ornoco Estates and HRA and Olmsted County. So hopefully Dave can work with those folks and we'll do what we can to help facilitate that if there are people in need. It's another opportunity, so worth the time. The phase 2 sanitary sewer water main, have those contracts prepared too, and I'm planning to send those out ASAP. Their project manager called me today. They are very anxious. They indicated that their suppliers are, again, they need to order their stuff and they want to know what I think is going to happen. And I've been telling them that, never has had, it's not awarded until it's awarded, but every indication that I get is that, people are in favor of moving this forward. And so that's all I can tell them. But hopefully that's the case. So the Riverbend HOA, that's for that river restoration piece. They did sign and execute that agreement. That is good. The Cedar Woodlands HOA, we've had some correspondence with them. They are in the process of I think they've had that information since August and are in the process of continuing to review that. We did have the opportunity to meet with one of the property owners adjacent to the driveway to lift station 4 that goes out to or goes through that ravine, and had a nice conversation with that gentleman, Brent
Jarvis.
Because they were at the meeting, so I'm
Oh.
glad you got to go.
Yeah, no, we went out, we walked the site with him, and
I think his main concern, right, was that the access road would end up taking up more than the easement, right?
well, that was one of them. I would say his main concern probably was, there will be trees impacted, and that's just a reality. We kind of talked through what we were doing to try to mitigate the number of trees taken and, what that roadway would actually look like. It's not a roadway, it's a driveway, it's a 12-foot driveway. But there's a pretty good size embankment that has to happen to make that all work. And just kind of talking through what that would look like. And, I think him understanding that we understand that, taking trees isn't desirable from anybody's perspective. We're trying to mitigate that with some of the slopes that we're using and where the lift station would be located and how that would or wouldn't impact his property. And I think at the end of the day, he was, I don't think he's thrilled that it's going to happen, but I think he's understanding that it needs to happen.
A lot of the trees that he made was in question is if you're familiar with that area, there's really a steep drop off behind his house, and that's where a lot of the trees are going to be
Through that ravine.
removed and,
So,
I think the main concern was just making sure we stayed within that 20-foot easement and the impact, and so that was
Those trees could be
his
used
questions.
for the bank remediation for the tollwood.
we will potentially use, well, probably not those trees because they're too far away. We've got the outfall line going down there too, and that'll take quite a few trees and they're closer to the river. So it's probably just a function of whatever's closer they'll use.
Okay.
I would also kind of back up on the Riverbend HOA piece. They did approve that agreement. I would just mention to the committee that they're planning to petition the city to be part of the project. They want to get connected ASAP.
What does that mean?
Meaning that they have a community waste treatment system that the developer's agreement requires the city to allow them to operate for 10 years. The HOA owns that now, and they're willing or wanting to waive that requirement and abandon that facility. And, I've kind of explained that, you can't just jump and, we've been prepared environmental documents and archaeological studies and, lots of permitting has went into this, and our project has been defined, but that doesn't mean that, we couldn't look at adding that piece of the puzzle at some point in time. Maybe over the next few years if the council wishes. But don't be surprised if that comes to the city. I told them that would be a reasonable way to approach a city is, put a letter in writing, essentially a petition from the HOA saying, this is the situation and this is how we'd like to proceed. And so, maybe that'll come, maybe something will happen, maybe nothing will happen, I don't know, but they're interested, very interested, I would say, in making that
How many homes is it?
17.
So there would be cost involved with that
Absolutely.
because there's nothing in the bonding bill money for that access. So any type of connection or the sewer line that goes by on the street, that's within the Riverwood Hills infrastructure. That connection would have to be, they'll have to take care of those charges themselves, those fees.
What stage were they? They're saying 10 years, so they were in.
Yeah, they were in the
phase.
1B phase. Yeah. So, and that 10 years started 2-3 years ago. So, it probably is what, 28, 27? That it would.
So the trunk lines should already be sized for
Yeah.
that, right? So really, it's just the extension into that subdivision and.
Yeah, in fact, the sanitary sewer is on Riverwood Drive, a gravity sewer manhole. And so it's essentially extending force main from the lift station to that gravity manhole, and then probably some retooling at the lift station to make all that happen. And then, of course,
The HOA would retain ownership of the lift station.
that would have to be negotiated. I'm sure they wouldn't want to.
I'm sure they wouldn't either.
I wouldn't want to if I were them.
The city doesn't really want
They'd
to
have to
either. right?
decommission it too,
They'd have to decommission the
drain fields.
drain field, but the developer retains the property then, and essentially, the assumption is somebody could build a house on it. Right, so there's some value there and so anyway, we don't have to deal with that to a great extent tonight, but just know that those talks are kind of initiated and I've provided some information to that group. Permanent easements. So we've kind of talked about this before. We do have all the permanent easements with the exception of the Ornoco Estates. That easement is part of this document, and so hopefully it's all executed by Friday afternoon. The one thing that hasn't been done on the easement side is, and we've talked about it for several months here, is the recording of those documents. And the recording of the easement documents, unless we want to do it multiple times, needs to have the loan agreements. The loan and grant agreement numbers recorded in conjunction with the easement document. And we don't have those documents yet. PFA is saying that we should have those documents by the end of the month. And so, or those numbers for those documents by the end of the month. And so that would allow us to incorporate them in the recording documents and record the documents, make the payments and be on our way. But it's kind of continues to be an item that drags a little bit for items that we don't really have a lot of control over. But low pressure sewer systems, not a lot's happening on that end. We kind of continue to be at about that 80% mark of completion. There's a handful of entities. I think the Presbyterian Church is one of them, and there's a few property owners that continue to promise that they're going to get it sent in, and they just don't for whatever reason. And then there's a larger group, maybe 15 parcels or so that just either have a reason or don't respond or whatever and don't seem to want to be interested. I did talk to an individual yesterday. And we had a nice conversation, and I think ultimately he will, not ultimately, I'd be surprised if he doesn't send it in soon, but one of the things that he misunderstood was that he was thinking that if he didn't sign the agreement, he would save money. And he would be able to use the money he saves to hire somebody privately and do it cheaper than he thought the city could do it. Well, that's not the case, right? I mean, he would get an assessment, and then on top of the assessment, would have to pay somebody to come in and do it. And so we kind of talked through that scenario, and I think that was enlightening because he had a plumber in mind. Plumber, I think, that lives here, and that plumber maybe was talking to other people about this. And so people might have been thinking that, well, we're just not assign it and we'll save a bunch of money here. And that's just not the case. And so I had a very clear, concise conversation, and this gentleman understood completely when we finished. And so I'm hopeful that he signs, but also that now that we maybe understand that misinformation is out there, we can maybe address that differently with folks and make sure that,
And that was somebody on West Center Street?
yes.
Okay. Because there are several on West Center Street, and
So,
maybe they'll share that information.
yeah. So this group too can help get that word out if you have the opportunity.
So just curious, Joe, is there somebody who's, and maybe Ryland or somebody else is a better person to ask, but somebody who's kind of been tasked to reach out to those people individually and say, hey, just curious, is there a reason you haven't signed these? Because
So that would be
Right, there's-
Linda Brown, she's the real estate
Yeah.
agent that has gotten all the easements. She's had lots of phone conversations with these folks. And then when there are questions that I can help answer, she'll either email me or I'll call them directly. And that's what happened with this gentleman yesterday. She was on the phone with him. And then she emailed me with some of his questions and said I could either call or respond to email. So I called him and we had a nice conversation. So, and there are some people that you can't get a hold of. They don't respond to mailing or calling or. So we've got a handful of those.
so the folks that seem like they are willing to sign but haven't yet. And then the second camp of the folks who probably just aren't going to.
Right.
At what point did they get just excluded? And do we decide to take the money that we were going to spend on that portion of the project and it's available? Or
Well, they won't be excluded unless there's been a mutual agreement to exclude them. We only have 2 families on East Center Street, going up the East Center Hill, that they've talked with Joe and come to agreement because the topography of where they're at and everything and the rock.
Well, when I say excluded, I mean, we can't construct a lift station on their property because they won't allow it.
They don't grant the access easement and maintenance agreement. We cannot go on their property. They will not see an improvement on their property. And so if that happens, then that, $19,000 is just saved and ultimately would get spread out amongst all of everybody else that's a user. So everybody's assessment would go down.
So at some point, the contractor will be
$50
laying
or
pipe
whatever.
down the street and we'll just skip over that house. And at that point.
No, we'll lay pipe down the street and then we'll extend a service to it and then we'll stop at the property line and that's it.
But is there a date? Is there a cutoff date to have the contract signed? I think that's.
Or the easement or
The
whatever.
easement.
Yeah, so,
I mean, we're not.
we kind of put out that soft deadline before within the letter to kind of spur people's action, but you know, is there a real deadline? I guess the real deadline is when they're installing the grinder stations and the contractor says, well, I'm gonna be done tomorrow.
Or I need to order
Oh, yeah.
78 of them.
It's
and-
probably that
Yeah.
too, you know, realistically, you just don't,
You don't go to the hardware store. and pick
you don't
up a
go into the
grinder
hardware
station.
store and just buy another one. So, yeah, you know, it's
Okay.
sometime a ways from now, that reality would probably have kind of really set in, but you know, my thought process at this point is let's get into construction. And we'll reapproach these folks, you know, maybe next summer. Because right now, they're not hearing us.
The normal time, once we start operation, the water ordinance has 12 months after we're operational, if they have to extend or hook in. And then after that is when we can start charging the assessment against those properties and late fees. That'll either be, they can either pay those or they'll be assessed on their taxes, just like the water system is. But then if they wait that long, then they'll most likely we'll be having to put that sewer, the low pressure system in themselves.
Oh, yeah, because the project would be done by that point.
Way done,
Way done, yeah.
way done. Like a year and a half before that. So.
Okay.
Clean water revolving fund, drinking water revolving fund loans, the bonding grants, the PSIG grants, all of those pieces are moving forward. Working with specifically the PFA folks on moving those agreements and loan documents forward. So we've made some pretty good progress on that, and I'm expecting to get pretty much most of that stuff submitted this week. Well, really all of the stuff that Anita's asked for this week. We did complete a life expectancy analysis on the treatment and collection conveyance system, which essentially for a 30-year loan like we've qualified for, you have to document that all of the components of the wastewater treatment facility on average have a life expectancy that exceeds the term of the loan. If that makes sense. They don't want to loan you money for over a 30-year term for a 25-year improvement. And so we put together a 14-page report essentially documenting that process. It ended up that we came up with 35 years. And so
We also did some projections of breaking down the operation and maintenance cost. That's something that Anita wanted and these are just estimates, what's gonna be like in 2024 on the expenditure side. And so we took our best guess, or Joe did, I should say, I just took a section of our water budget spreadsheet and made that the sewer and estimated what we think salaries and payroll taxes and based on the salaries, employees side benefits.
and Mike Babani's prepared the cash flow statements for the project based on the meeting that we had last month with him. And he submitted that documentation. So things are moving along, getting done. We're getting pretty close. So that's good news. Item B, I think, kind of ties to the permanent easement discussion we've already had. Item C deals with one of those items on the list of things that PFA needs from the city. So believe it or not, they give you $7 million in point source implementation grant, but then they charge you 0.5% of that value to administer the grant. You can't make it up, but they do. And believe it or not, that $35,000 isn't eligible for loan funding. So you just got to pay that.
My old employer did exactly the same thing.
I can't do the math on that, but that's what she says we need to do, and so it's going to council for approval so that the city can cut the check, so it is what it is, I guess. It was included in the project cost estimates, so it's part of the big picture budget, but it's silly.
You tell her she gets the money when we get our loan numbers and the other stuff you need.
That's not how it works.
Bummer.
You're like,
That's not how it works.
You scratch my back, I scratch yours.
Wouldn't that be nice? Item D. We talked about this too, the contracts 1, 2, and 3, we are nearing the end of our award window. It looks like Ornoco Estates grant or the treatment agreement between Ornoco and Ornoco Estates is gonna move forward. All of the grant pieces and the loan pieces are coming together. We need to award the project. Our award window is closing, and I think we would all like to have awarded this 30 days ago, but here we are. So this is our opportunity at the regular council meeting to go ahead and do that. So I think now is the time we're in good shape to do that. And so we prepared a resolution to that end. It was in the packet at the October meeting. It was tabled at that point, so we could continue down this path, and here we are. So the resolution will be updated with the current dates and present that to the council for consideration. In conjunction with that, we're working to put together, Stantec's working together, I'm working to put together a construction services proposal, just like we did for the design aspects of the project, to deal with the construction admin, the staking, the inspection pieces that we need to do for the project. And so, that's all fund eligible, but we need to execute an agreement with the city, and then the city and PFA need to execute an agreement that essentially uses that agreement as its scope of services. And then we'll be able to move that forward.
So over the course of the project, those will be invoices coming in, pay requests coming into you for those services.
Well,
That are
it's just like on the design side, we'll invoice you, and then you submit the invoice to PFA for reimbursement.
Right.
But in this instance, when we're in construction, you'll be submitting on a monthly basis pay requests from the contractor for construction too, for reimbursement, and until that money's gone.
Okay.
So much more activity with reimbursements and sorting through that. So this is like the fastest meeting I've ever
no,
done.
I thought there was a whole nother page.
I was kind of feeling like there's a lot on the agenda, and we talked about a fair amount, but
Good job.
What happens to those individuals that don't want to sign on, and they're gonna sit there and wait till the last minute?
yeah, so
And all of a sudden, they decide they're gonna sell their house and get rid of it. Can they even sell their house? I
so
mean, in a situation like that?
this is the letter that they were sent back at some point. So
July.
yeah, in July. So within that letter, it kind of spells out what happens if they do or don't connect. And so if they don't connect, they still get assessed. If they don't connect, they still have to make a connection. It's just that they would have to construct the grinder station, the lift station themselves. They'd have to abandon their own septic tank, hook it up. That facility would have to comply with the city specifications because it's essentially pumping into our system. So it has to be the right kind of pump, the right kind of materials used. And they'd have to fund that cost without any of the benefit of the grant funding. Now that money doesn't go away. We've got a lump sum of money. And so essentially it just gets reallocated throughout the project when we recalculate the assessments at the end of the day. And
Well,
so
if there's a new owner comes in there, do the people that have it have to pay for all that before the new owner can get in there?
So right now, there is a pending assessment on everybody's property that will benefit from the project. And so when a property is sold, there's typically an assessment search. And so that pending assessment will show up. And so that should be disclosed to the buyer. And so, typically that's, it's a liability. And so there would be some mechanism of a negotiation. And so let's say it happened within the next year and one, the guy there today doesn't want to connect with and sign the agreement, but if we haven't installed all the grinder stations and then the new property owner comes in and says, I want to sign up. Sign them up, if we practically can. And then he would see that benefit. So I think in a nutshell, that's what you're asking.
The previous owner would have to pay for that assessment.
Well, he would have to disclose that there's a pending assessment because it won't be assessed until 2022
That's right.
onto the 2023 taxes. And so it's not an assessment until you certify the assessment on, in December of 2022 with the county. Then it's an assessment, people can pay it or whatever, but before then, it's just a
Mhm.
point of negotiation, so both sides understand what's going on.
Aside from the monthly fee that we'll end up charging them anyway, and the assessment that they're gonna get charged anyway, is there any other enforcement that they're gonna face, for example, from the county or?
Well, say they try to pull a building permit. Not just any building permit. If they're gonna put a roof on their house, probably doesn't matter, but if they're gonna, put a bedroom on or remodel their house in some way that kind of changes that, or they have a sale of their property, they would have to get a sewer inspection and their septic would,
Not pass, right?
would not pass.
What about, does the city, so every year we've sat down with the county and the state and talked through the MOU. How will that conversation go when we have 15 folks that are not compliant? Residents of Ornoco.
They're not compliant with the city's ordinance. Now, whether their septic system is compliant or not, we don't know unless there's an inspection. I don't know that we can force that inspection.
If they're
Right.
selling the house, if they happen to be selling the house, they might
Right.
have an inspection.
Right.
Home
And
inspection.
that's when things like that would, that would force the issue.
Would the city be subject to any liability or anything because of that?
I don't think so. And frankly, we've seen this before, PFA's seen this before. There are always holdouts. Most of them are gonna go away. Most of them are gonna stay. That's my opinion. People will come to their senses, or they'll sell their property or whatever. Most of those people at the end of the day will be the vast majority of those people. And if you read that letter, you look at it objectively, it might, I think all of us kind of agree, it's silly not to sign the agreement. But so there's some more work to do, but I don't know that we're making significant progress at this point. And so allow a little bit of time to go by and we'll reassess where we're at. And we've still got some time. I don't think we need to tell people there's a lot of time. I certainly have not been sharing that perspective.
It might be one of these things that when construction actually starts and they see the work actually being done, they may recognize it's happening and I better take a second look at this.
Well, it might be helpful too if a resident reaches out to them and not somebody who's been hired by the city to represent the city council or government, but.
So me and a
Someone
project
who's live-
manager from the contractor walk on site, they might really like the project manager from the contractor, because he's not the engineer, he's not me. He's not, working for the city, and everything that he says is probably true, and, you know, whatever, and maybe that'll help. Because the contractor, you know, they'll work with us. So just a different perspective, sometimes that facilitates it, hopefully, right?
They might just still be holding out, thinking that, this whole deal maybe fall through. You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that way. They'll hang on to the last minute. If they see it's gonna go away, then they'll get on to it. You never know. Some people are pretty stubborn.
It's human nature, you know, that helps convey that actually gonna happen. This is,
Right.
we're serious.
Well, they see the excavator in the street and they're happening, you know, it's true.
When the truck can't get to your tank to pump it because the road's torn up and your toilet won't flush. You'll know what's happening.
So Joe, your conversations with the contractors, any
Yeah.
idea when, sounds like that pre-construction meeting is gonna be like mid-December to late December, you think?
Maybe even before that, Fitzgerald asked me today what I thought they could do this year,
Oh, okay.
so.
They want to be finished early so they can get in on the rest of that construction money coming down the pipe.
There's work to do, and if they've got, you know, who knows what winter's gonna bring, but sometimes winter is not so bad. Especially working on lift stations and deep excavations and, you know, that river restoration piece over in River Bend. There are a number of things that, you know, really kind of can be done. And there's a lot of work to be done, and I think they understand that, so.
Okay, any other comments? So we've been working on this for 5 or 6 years. It's appropriate, I guess, that the last meeting is 45 minutes long because we've done all the work. So.
I don't think this is the last meeting. I don't know.
No, it's not the last supplement, that's for sure.
The last before the contracts are awarded.
It's a big
That's
hurdle,
big
though.
deal.
Oh, it's huge.
It's a huge hurdle.
Yeah, it's huge.
So when do you think the pre-con will be? I mean, if they want to do work in.
I would think November
2021.
or early December.
I suppose the treatment plant would probably be building the road first thing. Your extension.
Well, you know,
or not?
building roads is hard to do in the winter.
Yeah.
It really kind of depends on how much snow and frost there are, and, you know, you can do some earth movement. Depending on what you're doing. My guess, their main task is gonna be to order equipment and materials and get through the shop drawing process. You know, just that
Mhm.
is a big deal.
Okay.
So,
All right. We make a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
All right.
Second motion.
Who's that, Rob? Yeah. All right. Next meeting is December the 14th. Should we just see how everything plays out, whether we have a meeting in December or?
we can, my guess is we might be talking about value engineering options.
Okay. So let's keep that date on our calendars and go over there. All in favor?
Right.
Right. 7. Yeah. 7:18, thank you.
Now that that's over, I'd like to ask you a question, something else, Rylan.
Off the books.
Did you ever talk to Charlie? The township board about that street light? He was actually out of the city limits, but he wanted the lane extended to his.